to the Democracy Dispatch podcast. I'm Justin Marsh, Political Outreach Director at Vermont Conservation Voters. This is your weekly scoop on legislative action as we work to push forward environmental policies for Vermont. Each Monday, we will take a look back at the week prior, preview the week ahead, speak with legislators and advocates on topics affecting our air, water, open space, and quality of life. On today's show, I will be joined by Lauren Hurl for the Session Shakedown segment. Lauren chats with Representative Gabrielle Stebbins for our deep dive conversation about the work coming out of the House Environment and Energy Committee. Later on, I speak with Sarah Copeland Hanzas about her nearly 2 decades serving Vermonters and her ambitions for her new role as our Secretary of State. But first, if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to follow us on social media too. On Twitter, we are at VoteGreenVT, YouTube and Instagram at VT Conservation Voters, and find us on Facebook as well. You can subscribe to our emails, see our legislative scorecard, and learn more about our work and policies by visiting VermontConservationVoters.org. Have an idea for a story or want to provide feedback, email me at jmarsh@VermontConservationVoters.org. Shout out to listener Mary Floyd of Bethel, who wrote to me that they were, quote, amazed at how much emotion and enthusiasm that was evident in the subject of government. She especially appreciated the segment with Charity Clark last week. Thank you, Mary, for providing that. Now I am joined by Lauren Hurl, Executive Director of Vermont Conservation Voters, for our Session Shakedown segment. It's where we recap the week prior and look to this coming week of the session. Lots of excitement this week and last week, lots of long days on the floor. Thursday, the House voted 108 to 36 in favor of H126, which is an act related to community resilience and biodiversity protection, which calls for 30% of Vermont's land and water to be conserved by 2030 and 50% by 2050. We talk with Representative Amy Sheldon over on our sibling publication, the Climate Dispatch video series, fresh from her presenting the bill on the House floor and following its passing through the chamber. So for more information on H126, be sure to check out that video. And we expected a lot of other votes to go to the House last week, but they look like they're going to be this week instead. What do we have coming to the floor in the House chamber this week?
Yeah, this week we are expecting to see the bottle bill modernization on the floor. That bill has moved through several committees, and the version that will be headed to the floor, we will be strongly supporting. It's got really great provisions to improve recycling and update that program and really bring it into the 21st century.
Awesome. And also transportation and the budget are expected to be on the House floor as well.
Yeah, so lots of work going on last week to pull together the state budget. So next week we can do more of a roundup of what ended up in the budget related to our environmental priorities. And the transportation bill, which is also a big effort looking at our whole transportation system, well beyond the pieces that we follow, will also be up for action in the House. And similarly, we can do a roundup next week of where that landed for the various programs that we were looking at for how we're making our transportation system more pedestrian, biker, walker friendly, and also helping support the transition to cleaner vehicles.
Yes, and over on the Senate, there's a lot that we're expecting to be taken up by vote this week. Where's everything at?
Yes. So we are anticipating votes in the Senate on at least 3 VCV priority bills. One is the bill to ban PFAS and other toxic chemicals from personal care products, textiles, and artificial turf. So anticipating that vote this week. We're also anticipating a vote on the ranked choice voting bill. And finally, action on the smart growth housing bill, which has had lots of ongoing, robust conversation. So that will be interesting to see where that kind of final version of the Senate bill lands for that issue.
Awesome. And you spoke with Representative Gabrielle Stebbins about the work that the House Committee on Environment and Energy is taking on during this very busy point in the session, including their work on the Affordable Heat Act. Let's hear that now.
Great. I am so happy to be here today with Representative Gabrielle Stebbins from Burlington, who has been a wonderful new addition to the House Environment and Energy Committee, who will hear about a couple of the important priorities they've been working on. And Representative Stebbins is also a co-chair of the House's Climate Solutions Caucus, of the full legislature's Climate Solutions Caucus, which plays an absolutely critical role in ensuring the legislature stays focused and committed to ambitious climate action. So thanks for being with me.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So one of the notable actions today on our environmental agenda was passage of the Biodiversity and Conservation Bill, H126, and we will hear more about that from Chair Amy Sheldon, who we interviewed for the Climate Dispatch video, which we'll link to. So anyone who wants to hear more about that, please check out that. So while I have you, Representative Stebbins, could you tell us a little bit about the latest on what's happening with the bill to update the bottle bill?
Yeah, the bottle bill. So I think that comes up on Tuesday on the floor. And what's amazing about this bill is that we actually have not done anything to it since we first enacted it 50 years ago. What's great news for the bottle bill is that Vermonters are fantastic at recycling. 99% of our bottles either go into the blue bin or to redemption centers. What's not such great news is when our, for example, water bottles or plastic water bottles are put into a blue bin, a lot of times it ends up being contaminated, and then it can't be used for another bottle. Yes, it can be recycled, but a lot of times that ends up being, not as high quality as sort of a full circular recycling. So what this bill does basically is ask large producers, Coca-Cola, if you can recycle, if you can have a 5-cent deposit on a Coca-Cola bottle, why can't we do it for your water bottle? Dasani. Hey, Pepsi, if you can do it for Pepsi, why can't we do it for Aquafina? So it really places the responsibility for the life of the product with the industry, which personally I think is a great alignment because it gives the industry the opportunity to really be efficient with how the program is designed, to keep an eye on the costs, and really gives them control over that area of making sure that they are good partners and stewards as we continue to try and limit how much we use of our natural resources.
That is great. And so we're anticipating a floor vote. I'm here with you on Friday. So next week on Tuesday.
Yep.
And so we'll see hopefully action and a strong vote.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you have any representatives that might be a little uncertain, and if you support this bill, definitely reach out. Last year, I think we had 3.5 hours of floor debate on this bill. I will say that this bill is pretty it does a pretty good job of making important changes to the bill that we were debating last year. So this is an example of the committee heard a lot of the questions, a lot of the concerns. There was actually a summer working group that met of a bunch of the stakeholders to try and iron out some of the challenges, and now we have a bottle bill that hopefully won't be 3.5 hours on the floor. But it's always great to hear from our constituents that what we're working on matters to you.
Excellent. So another bill that you all have already started taking up that we know there's a lot of constituent interest and engagement on is the Affordable Heat Act. So again, to remind folks, this bill passed the Senate, and already it's exciting that the House Environment and Energy Committee has begun testimony. So could you just give us an update on what you all have started looking at and what we expect over the next couple weeks from your committee?
Sure. So we've only probably taken, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours of testimony so far, and really what the information is that we're learning and hearing right now is sort of laying the ground, hearing from the Public Service Department in terms of how other structures work, like our energy efficiency utilities, hearing from our legislative council, walking through the bill. It took us about 2.5 hours to just get through 25 out of 38 pages of the bill. So we're at the beginning stages and very open ears to the questions and the comments and the concerns from the people who come testify before us.
Great. So, of course, that bill has been a huge environmental community priority, big priority of the Climate Solutions Caucus. Anything that you would ask of Vermonters to think about who are listening to this podcast as we continue with the process for the Affordable Heat Act?
Yeah, I'd say, whenever there's big change, there is usually a lot of fear and worry and concerns. So, if you have any concerns or if you've gotten any information, I know a lot of my constituents got little notices in their fuel bill. And so they've been reaching out to me to learn more about this bill. But please reach out if you have questions. And if you like what you see, reach out and support it also, because we're definitely hearing the questions. So it's helpful to also hear, from all views.
Great. And I think one important change that the Senate made, which at least for being able to answer questions for Vermonters, is the Senate added a provision where the program will be developed, but then the legislature in 2 years will vote on actually implementing that program.
Yeah.
So there's this,
Yep.
this really robust opportunity to, I think, answer a lot of the questions that have been raised and, give us even more time to make sure that the program's going to do everything that we believe it will, creating opportunities for every Vermonter to transition to cleaner, more affordable heating solutions.
Yeah, I really see this bill as making sure that we're taking care of the folks who are least likely to be able to afford to make the shifts that, frankly, a lot of the folks who have more money, more resources are already making. They're already buying electric vehicles. They already have heat pumps. What this bill does really is, over the next year and a half, require sort of an engineering plan of how this structure would look like. And then in a year and a half from now, the legislature will review that plan and vote again to approve it or not.
Great. All right. Any last things you want to share with folks that you all have been up to before we transition?
Yeah, I think one of the other exciting pieces is that we took a lot of testimony about aquatic invasive species in our water bodies. And we did pass out of committee a bill to start to pull together, critical stakeholders to look at how we're treating our water bottles, our water bodies. And then also our committee made some strong recommendations to rebolster the funding to provide support for the staff that typically provide assistance and do some of the scientific research when it comes to having healthy water bodies. So we are listening to Vermonters when they say, hey, we can't fish anymore, we can't swim anymore, we're worried about our water quality. And that's something that hasn't gotten a lot of press because it's a little bit behind the scenes in terms of being placed in the budget bill. But really excited to see that forward progress, as well as some opportunities in climate workforce investment.
Great. All right. Well, this very busy crossover week. So grateful for your time, Representative Stebbins.
Thank you.
And you can hear the House chamber behind us filling up with people and noise.
Yep.
But now let's turn it over and hear Justin's interview with Secretary of State Sarah Copeland Hanzas.
Our 39th Secretary of State was sworn into office in January. Bradford's Sarah Copeland Hanzas transitioned to the role after an incredible 18-year legislative career representing her Orange County district. She has spent almost her entire life in Vermont as a student of our schools, then an educator in our schools, a youth coach, a small business owner, a state legislator, and a mother and wife. She has served as Majority House Leader and as Chair of the House Committee on Government Operations, certainly priming her for this role. In her final biennium in the State House, she held a perfect 100 score from our organization and maintained a lifetime score of 91. Welcome to the podcast, Secretary of State Copeland Hanzas.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
First, I want to just note how much I admire your community in Bradford. There really is a sense of togetherness and community that I've witnessed that I recognize in many Vermont towns, but not all of them have that special sauce like I feel Bradford does. I'm sure it's hard to encapsulate nearly 2 decades of time representing your community in the Vermont House, but if you had to say, what do you think makes your community so special?
Well, I think that there are a lot of special communities, as you said, around Vermont. And I think the thing that I love about Bradford is that it's a mix of folks who've lived there for a long time who have also opened their arms welcomingly to new people. And I often find that it is new people and new energy that collaborates with the longtime folks and their energy that makes the perfect special combination. So
I love that.
That's my guess.
Yes. So what inspired your desire to seek the office of Secretary of State? It's not entirely uncommon for someone to make the shift from legislator to Secretary of State. But was this something that you had your eyes on for a while, or was it an opportunistic move?
Well, the beautiful thing about the Secretary of State's office is that it really is the keeper of access to government, the keeper of democracy, and those things are really appealing to me. During my time in the legislature, I worked on a lot of issues that I was really passionate about. Climate and the environment being two of them, but also access to affordable health care, or sexual harassment in the workplace, or modernizing our sexual assault statutes to protect people. All of the things that I've worked on, though, have been things that have come to me because people stood up and said, this is a problem that I see, and I want the government to help us figure out how to fix it. And, I always say that the point of a democracy is that we come together to solve problems that none of us could solve on our own individually, right? And what better place to exemplify that than climate action, right? Nothing that you do individually or that I do individually will save our planet. But if we're all working together, and if we come with a voice and activate our democracy, we can make big change. And so I really like the idea of coming into the Secretary of State's role, because I really truly believe that a healthy democracy is the only way that we're going to demand this kind of action that we need from our leaders.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you've ever even voted in the state, then you can say that you've interacted with your office. And you owned a small business in Bradford, and so you're very familiar as a customer of the Secretary of State's office. But there's so much to the office. What exactly does the Secretary of State's office do?
So we have 4 main divisions. We register corporations. So you come in, you get your trade name. You then can go into the other parts of state government that you need to interact with as maybe an employer or a small business. But your first stop is the Secretary of State's office. We also protect the public through our Office of Professional Regulation. That is, the standards that a professional needs to have in order to practice their profession. They get their license or their certificate through the Office of Professional Regulation, and if something goes awry, our team is part of investigating and protecting the public in that way. We are the keepers of the state archives. So all of the records and archives and historical documents of our state, going all the way back to pre-statehood, are stored and managed in the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration, and that is becoming an increasingly digital proposition as more agencies go from paper records and paper forms to digital, and so that's an exciting place to really engage in some 21st century thinking. And then, of course, the elections division is sort of the highest profile. And, my goal with elections is really to help Vermonters understand how to do democracy, how to come together with a group of people who see a common problem and petition your government to help you solve that. It's not just about voting. And we're hiring an education and civic engagement coordinator. And I always say, yeah, you need to understand civics because you need to understand how government works so that you're not susceptible to, misinformation about stolen elections. But civics isn't just about, the sort of dry, boring three branches of government. Civics is about how do you come together and make change. And in that way, I think we're really hoping to energize and activate Vermonters to be able to get to get involved in democracy, regardless of what what your priorities are. How do you come together and try to make change?
I love that. And I have a question that I'm going to go a little rogue right now because I want to know a little bit more about the archives. The both the Senate and House committees for government operations. I took a little tour of the archives maybe about a month ago, and I had a lot of envy. So where are those archives? Is it appointment only? What can you, I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh, it's
as a
fascinating.
Vermonter.
If you like history, if you like genealogy, if you like knowing what your community looked like and who the decision makers were at times in the past, you want to take a trip to the archives. They're in Middlesex. We do have a public records room. You can come, and folks who work there will help people do genealogical research. They'll help folks do, the history of the Constitution research. What were the what were the debates in the legislature around this bill or that bill? And so there's just a wealth of information there. And I totally, I think one of my dream nightmares would be to accidentally get locked in the archives for the night, because then I'd have nothing to do but, go around and dig around and research and learn things about where we came from.
Yeah. I mean, I have put myself in my town records in the vault before and just like really went wild in there. So I can only imagine
exactly.
It's just that, but
it's
elevated.
Like that, but like thousands of times larger. Yes.
Yeah.
Floor to ceiling,
Amazing. And so you can just make an appointment to visit.
You can make an appointment. Yeah.
Okay.
They don't actually
you can't just walk in.
They don't actually let you just run wild in the actual stacks, but you can go in there, you can ask for help. I came across a gentleman who was visiting with Visara once last fall, who had these historic railroad documents that he'd inherited from his uncle's estate, and he wanted to know if they had historic value, and if they did, he wanted to be able to give them to the archives. And so he sat with the director of the archives for, I want to say, 2-3 hours, and they talked about it, and he showed her what he had, and it's just, you never know what's going to walk through the door there.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to put that on my bucket list. And so VCV, Vermont Conservation Voters, we're often associated with the conservation part of our organization's name, and more so than we are with the voters part. But voting and access and protection and the expansion of democracy is very much aligned with our organization and the work that you do. What steps has the office made over the past decade or so, and what are the goals in this regard for your tenure?
Oh, that's such a great question. So under my predecessor's leadership, we did a lot of work on increasing access to the ballot box. Every year that I would stand out at the polls as a state representative asking my neighbors to vote for me, I would hear people come out of the polls and whenever I heard something that was a frustration, I made note of it. So, it used to be that we would hear people say, well, I came here to vote today. I took time off of work and I got in there and they said that I'm not on the checklist. Well, what can we do about that? So under Jim Condo's leadership, the legislature passed automatic voter registration so that when you go to the DMV, unless you opt out, you can be automatically added to the voter rolls. So that's really important. We also realized, though, that there are times when people maybe you moved from Bradford to Newbury and you forgot in the hustle and bustle of moving that you needed to change your voter registration. So we instituted same-day voter registration. So now you can go into your new community the day that you want to vote, and you can register and vote. And then during the pandemic, of course, we had to find a way for people to be able to vote safely without having to come face to face with the folks running elections in their community. And so we instituted vote by mail. And it was so popular, and we saw such a great turnout that we came back the following year and made automatic vote by mail permanent. And now every general election, you will automatically get a ballot in the mail. Not local elections, not primaries, but your November general election. And certainly we want to continue to have the conversation about how to get automatic mailing of ballots for other elections, because Vermonters find that to be very convenient, and it does boost turnout, which is a good thing. When you live in a democracy, you want more people to vote.
Exactly. And so I know that we're going to talk about S32 soon, but what are, besides putting that one aside, what are some other goals that you have for your office?
So really my prime focus is around this education and civic engagement. So this position will be filled as of the beginning of April. And when we get this person on board, our first phase is going to be to start developing civics curriculum for school teachers in Vermont that will be Vermont relevant and easy to plug into the lessons that they already need to teach. We want to have a group of teacher advisors who come and say, this is something that would be really the best way to do it. And so we will not be creating this in a vacuum. We'll be creating it with the help of the people who are actually out there teaching right now. But pre-K all the way through to high school, we need to do a better job of preparing young people to dive into democracy. We also need to recognize that there are a lot of adults in the communities who either didn't have a good civics background or they've forgotten what they learned. So we also want to do a lot of engagement out in the communities, tabling at a farmer's market or going to the county fair or holding events in local communities around how do you participate in democracy? How do you make change when you see something that's not being done? And so phase 2 will be that outreach to adults to get adults equipped with the information that they need in order to feel inspired to vote. And then phase 3 will be in the run-up to the 2024 general election, because I think we need to start creating a voter guide so that when you get your ballot in the mail 45 days ahead of the election, you also get your voter guide so that you can spend that time with your ballot researching the candidates and finding the candidates whose values most closely match yours.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that. And I also really I saw that you distributed a bunch of the Freedom and Unity graphic, what would you call that? A graphic guide?
Yes,
I think, right?
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great collaboration with the Center for Cartoon Studies and something that was created during Jim Condo's time that we will continue to distribute because it is so fun and helpful. And hopefully we'll have future chapters of that series, and it's a great way to engage with people about how to do democracy.
Absolutely. And episode 2 of this podcast, I sit down with Susan Clark, who contributed to that. So if you want all the information, you can check out that episode.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Well, you've gotten a touch on everyone. I love
try.
it.
So S32, which is an elections bill, that would be the start of a dramatic improvement to how we choose our elected leaders. At this time of the recording, it's Thursday, March 23rd. The bill is with the Senate Committee on Appropriations after passing the Senate Committee on Government Operations with a unanimous tripartisan vote. If enacted, S32 would put ranked choice voting in place for Vermont's presidential primaries starting in 2028. It would allow municipalities to adopt ranked choice voting for local elections without having legislative approval, and it would create a summer study committee to look at how to best educate voters and to determine what 2026 statewide elections may use ranked choice voting. You gave testimony on the Senate Committee on Government Operations and ran on a platform that included ranked choice voting. What are your thoughts and feelings on this bill, and why do you feel it is important for Vermonters?
So I think that there are a lot of elections in Vermont where it is helpful for somebody to be able to say, out of a group of candidates, I like this person first, but if they don't win, I would like to be able to cast a ballot for this person. And so that is essentially what ranked choice voting does, is it allows you to say, this is my favorite, this is my second favorite, this is my third favorite. And that's really why I support ranked choice voting, because I think it gives power to people to vote their hearts and their values, but it also gives them the option to give that fallback or that second or third preference in the event that their first choice candidate doesn't win. The reason why I think it's great to start with a presidential primary is because that is one of the only races in Vermont where you're virtually guaranteed to have multiple candidates on that ballot, right? Many times when I ran for my state representative seat, it would be, me on the Democratic side and maybe one person on the Republican side, and there was no third candidate. And so in those races, those state house races, it may not be as relevant, but there are always races where there are multiple candidates where it would be helpful. And that's why I thought it would be helpful to start with that presidential primary. I think when the Senate committee got into the nitty-gritty detail and realized how many moving parts there were, they decided to pull back from the 2024 presidential primary. I think in part because they heard from town clerks who were like, oh my gosh, we just barely did all of these, automatic vote by mail changes. And now in, 8 months, you want us to figure out how to pull off ranked choice voting. And so the committee listened and responded, but I'm really excited that what they did in passing the bill out, they didn't just push the date back to 2028, where we're all going to sort of fall asleep before we ever get a chance to start working with ranked choice voting. What they did is they said that municipalities can vote to adopt ranked choice voting if that's what the municipality wants. And that's going to give Vermonters a lot of opportunity, I think, to learn what ranked choice voting is about, to practice it, to use it, to see what those ballots look like, and also see the great possibilities that it gives to help that election settle on the person who has the broadest support, which is really what you want in your leaders.
Yeah, and already right now municipalities can do it, but they have to go through legislative approval.
They would have to get a charter change, like Burlington did. And this bill, if enacted, would make that a much smoother process. It would just be a vote of the local electorate to say, yep, we want our next local elections to be done by ranked choice.
And so you mentioned waiting around until 2028. Of course, this bill would create the summer study. What about 2026 for statewide elections? Is that on the radar?
Yeah. So the committee, the Senate committee, put together this summer study group, which I think is going to be a great opportunity to really think about and look at where it makes sense to do ranked choice voting in other races, and that would be the opportunity in that midterm of 2026. Again, it doesn't make sense to have ranked choice voting in a place where you only usually see two candidates, right? It makes sense to use it in a place where you often have multiple candidates. So that'll be the exploration that this summer study committee will do, is, where do we think we would use it if we wanted to use it in 26, and what are the nitty-gritty election procedure details that we want to set into statute so that our local clerks who administer elections would know how to do that in future elections.
Well, it's very exciting, and this will likely go to the Senate floor next week, I'm imagining, or this week by the time you're listening to this. And when you were in the House, you were the lead sponsor on the Global Warming Solutions Act, and you finished your time in legislature as the co-chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus for 3 years. How do you see this role playing a part in that conversation, and why is it such an important cause to be fighting for?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So when I think about why, I come back to the many, many conversations that I've had with young people. I've always been a teacher and a coach, and, I have 3 kids who are now in their early 20s. But even just last week, I went over to the State House to talk with this group of pages, the 8th graders, who are helping to deliver messages and bills around to different folks in the State House. And, whenever you ask young people what they're concerned about, they come up with some really big and weighty issues, and ones that frankly make me disappointed in ourselves that my generation hasn't been able to figure these out. We're talking about school shootings, we're talking about mental health and self-harm, we're talking about LGBTQ, we're talking about social justice and racial justice issues. I want to take all that I've learned in my time in the legislature and now in the role of Secretary of State, and really put it towards helping young people feel empowered to make the changes that we were never able to make or haven't yet been able to make, because they are so powerful. It was the young people coming to the State House during the debate around the Global Warming Solutions Act that pushed that bill over the edge. Some of the folks who serve in the legislature are sort of grandparent age. And when they saw young people coming up to them and saying, look, I need to live another 70 years on this planet. I need you to act now so that this will be a habitable place. Because right now, I don't feel like I could start a family, because I don't think that there will be an earth for me to raise a family in. And, so those voices are so important to our political process. And I'm really looking forward to helping them amplify their voices so that we can accomplish some of the things that we need to do.
Well, I thank you so much for not only taking the time today to do this interview, but also for your leadership, and as a statewide elected and someone who's done this work for so long. I really appreciate everything that you've done in your dedication and service.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to do all of these fine things and more. And I really hope that I hope that we can continue to do good work together, because Vermont's a special place.
Absolutely. And as we kind of see things evolve, I'm sure we'll have you back for little times here and there to give us updates on all things elections and Secretary of State office. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Now it's time for our climate stat of the week. 18,900. That is the approximate number of people that make up Vermont's climate workforce who work at least some of the time in climate mitigation, adaptation, or resilience, according to the Energy Action Network's 2022 report. This includes the 17,502 clean energy workers documented in the 2021 Clean Energy Industry Report, plus climate workers in other sectors such as agriculture and land management, waste management, public transit, education, financing and philanthropy, and selling and servicing electric equipment. Reaching our climate requirements will require a significant increase in Vermont's climate workforce. For example, we currently have about 770 people working in weatherization as field workers, office staff, and energy auditors, but we may need more than 6,200 people in those careers by 2030. Similarly, we have about 225 HVAC workers in Vermont in 2020, installing single zone and multi-zone heat pumps, and we'll need to double those numbers to more than 450 people in those careers by 2030. I want to thank our guests, Secretary of State Sarah Copeland Hanzas, as well as Representative Gabrielle Stebbins, and of course, Lauren Hurl for assisting me. Next week, I will be back with an interview with our Lieutenant Governor, David Zuckerman. Until next time, thanks for listening.